All right, SIG 23. It is 26 January 2021. This is video number 2 of my catch-up because I found a bunch of these in, for some reason, my promotions folder of my email. I have no idea why, but whatever, there it is. So, this is again from Fort Observer. Political warning. This is from December 22. Yeah. Grassroots anger towards Congress. Americans on both the left and the right have expressed anger and resentment towards a coronavirus relief bill laden with foreign spending. Some conservatives are calling for President Trump to veto the bill, which contains billions of dollars for foreign countries, including $10 million for gender programs in Pakistan. Just take a wild guess who might have suggested that. It wouldn't be conservatives, and it wouldn't be Americans. That only leaves one group left. But just a $600 direct payment for most Americans. Some lawmakers have stated their desire for the bill to provide larger direct payments due to ongoing shutdowns. Observers note, one of the pillars of national stability is a people's belief in the legitimacy of government. Many Americans are profoundly disappointed that during new lockdowns and restrictions, Congress agreed that a one-time $600 payment was the preferred solution. I think they agreed on like a $1,400 payment, which of course is just going to be taken out in taxes. You do realize that. These aren't gimmies. They're going to take it back. They caused this, and they're giving you money, and then they're going to take the money back. Moreover, these payments won't hit bank accounts until early January. Well, they should have hit by now then. Weeks to months after it's needed, especially ahead of Christmas. It's a sign for many that Congress is incredibly out of touch with the average American and that members of Congress don't care about the plight of the average American. What was your first fucking clue? Especially when so much money in the coronavirus bill has nothing to do with domestic relief. Members of Congress are being scolded on social media like they care, while some are promoting physical protests and others are tacitly encouraging violence. Earlier this year, George Soros described the current condition of the United States as a revolutionary movement. Well, he would know, Mr. Color Revolution in different parts of the globe. Bridgewater's Ray Dalio, a billionaire hedge fund manager, previously described the potential for a coming conflict between capitalists and socialists. I don't see it. It's the 26th of January. The usurpation occurred. There is no revolution. So, I see, observers note continuing, I see continued interest on both left and right for alternatives to the existing system of governance. I've been very clear in my belief that we're living through the early stage of a domestic conflict and the late stage of the American empire. At a time when the legitimacy of government is being questioned by both sides, this congressional misstep is likely to deepen a desire for many to seek alternatives. House Democrats intend to reissue subpoena for Trump tax records. According to House Counsel Douglas Letter, the House Oversight Committee intends to reissue a subpoena for financial records from President Donald Trump next year. Democratic lawmakers claim that the documents are required for potential ethics reform legislation under consideration for the next Congress. Why don't you go after everybody who went into Congress relatively penniless and now they're millionaires? Why don't you go after them? Why don't you go after, because you won't. It's rhetorical. I'm taking it for granted that this is rhetorical. But, you know, I mean, there are many people sitting in Congress still who have made millions upon millions, enriching themselves, enriching their families, enriching their friends. And we put them in office. Well, no, I don't put them in office. People put these people in office. So, observers note the renewed push for the president's tax documents and the involvement of Letter, who worked on the House's impeachment efforts, will raise concerns of political retribution under the next administration, you think? Ethics policy changes and legislation passed in 2021 after reviewing his finances could be geared towards preventing a 2024 Trump run for the White House. Significant activity roll-up from the White House. President Donald Trump issued an executive order promoting the redemption of savings bond. The order instructs the Department of the Treasury to ensure that Americans who have invested in U.S. savings bonds will receive lawfully entitled remuneration and connect investors with matured bonds. Observers note, savings bonds are one of the most conservative, low-risk investments in the United States. The president's push to promote confidence in the bonds investment could indicate concerns over the long-term stability of the U.S. government and not being able to redeem mature bonds in the long term. From the Senate, according to reports, Senator Ted Cruz has begun urging Trump to submit the Iran nuclear deal and Paris climate agreement to the Senate for ratification. Only by doing so, quote, only by doing so will the Senate be able to satisfy its constitutional role to provide advice and consent in the event that any future administration attempts to revive these dangerous deals, end quote. Well, we can see where that's happening, especially with the Paris climate agreement and the current usurper-in-chief. Observers note Cruz's goal is for the agreements not to be ratified, which would be a roadblock for Biden, who has promised to recommit the country to these deals once in power. From Department of Homeland Security, from former Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency CISA head Christopher Krebs called for legislators to ease calls for retaliation following the recent Russian cyber attack. Krebs said, "I'd be very careful with escalating this. We need a conversation among like-minded countries." Observers note, Krebs likely believes that escalation is unlikely to end cyber exploitation of the United States and that a multilateral diplomatic approach with other Western countries affected by Russian exploitation is more likely to deter future attacks. It may also be the case that, as we reminded readers yesterday of Woodman the 21st of December, Russia wields substantial cyber power and may be willing to further escalate a U.S. response, especially during the presidential usurpation transition. I get those two so mixed up. I'm sure you can understand why. From Defense, the USS Georgia, an Ohio-class guided nuclear submarine, passed through the Strait of Hormuz in an incredibly rare disclosure of U.S. nuclear submarine asset movement. A Navy press release stated Georgia's presence in the U.S. Fifth Fleet Area of Operations demonstrates the U.S. Navy's ability to sail and operate wherever international law orders. Observers note, nuclear submarine movements are strictly guarded within the military. Naval, surface, and aviation assets commonly operate in the vicinity of submarines without knowledge of their true locations. The guided nuclear submarine, in particular, submarines, in particular, often operate independent of other naval forces on nuclear deterrent, clandestine cruise missile strikes, and special operations deployments. The public announcement of the nuclear submarine's presence is clearly a show of force towards Iran primarily, but also to China and Russia, who have interests in the Fifth Fleet area of operations from the state. Secretary of State Michael Pompeo announced additional restrictions on visa issuances for Chinese officials believed to be complicit or responsible for ongoing human rights abuses. Pompeo called for the immediate release of several prominent political prisoners of the Communist Chinese Party and said this action demonstrates the U.S. government's resolve to hold the CCP accountable for its increasing repression against the Chinese people. Observers note, Pompeo has argued that the administration's actions against the CCP have provided cover for other countries to be openly critical of China and begin building a counter-Beijing coalition. Specifically, Australia, Japan, and India have been able to be increasingly critical of Chinese domestic and international policies. From their economic warning, Biden team picks National Economic Council leaders. Joe Biden announced that Obama-era David Carmen will be Deputy Director of the National Economic Council. Bharat Ramamurthy, former aide to Senator Elizabeth Warren, will be Deputy National Economics Council Director for Financial Reform. In a statement, Biden said, "This is not a time to build back the way things were before. This is a moment to build a new American economy that works for all." Like immediately on your first day, throwing 56,000 Americans into unemployment. That's building back better. Observers note, in 2019, David Carmen co-authored a paper entitled Taxing the Rich, Issues and Opinions, in which he argues for raising a large amount of revenues primarily from the most affluent, first discussing potential incremental reforms, and then focusing on four main options for more structural reform. Number one, dramatically increasing the top tax rates on labor and other ordinary income. Number two, taxing the wealthy on accrued gains as they arise and at ordinary rates. Three, a wealth tax on high net worth individuals. And four, a financial transactions tax. Carmen notes that almost 40% of all the wealth of the top 1% is in the form of accrued and unrealized capital gains. Taxing accrued gains as they arise and at ordinary rates means that the wealthy will be paying capital gains taxes on unrealized profits. In at least some instances, that means Americans will be paying taxes on assets that have risen in value, but which have not been sold. In other words, Americans might be paying capital gains tax on investments before capital gains are even realized. That's almost like the Department of Pre-Crime. We're going to arrest you and convict you before you've actually done anything because you might. We're going to tax you on these things because, well, while you haven't accrued any gains, you might. In other words, let's see. Expect a Biden National Economic Council to further push for repealing the 2017 tax reforms, reversing estate tax exemptions, increasing the corporate tax rate to at least 28%, raising foreign earned income tax to 21%, a 10% surtax on adjusted gross income over $2 million, increasing the capital gains and dividends tax rate to 28%, increasing the estate tax, increasing the self-employment tax, increasing the Affordable Care Act tax to 3.8%, and other measures. The observers repeatedly stressed that most or all of the Obama-era conservative sentiment and protest activities are coming back under a third Obama administration. You don't say. Expect similar anti-tax protests under the Biden. Why? Just stop. Container ship reliability dropping. According to the latest data, on-time arrivals for international container vessels has dropped to 50%, down from 80% this time last year. One-time arrivals have dropped by 25% since July 2020. I don't know, maybe COVID might have something to do with that? An intentional shutdown of the economy of the world? I don't know, reset comes to mind? Observers note the primary cause is congested waterways as shipping activity sharply increased through the fall. Inbound container ships at the Port of Los Angeles have nearly doubled compared to this time last year. Stockpiling and in some cases a lack of trucking capacity are also factors. While these delays don't appear to be a cause of substantial disruption, officials from Costco, a major chain affected by late arrivals, say they expect limited disruption through March of 2021. So, as they note, information provided by Ford Observer is simply for informational purposes only. You need to do your own digging and research. They don't give financial advice. They just see what could be trending. That's it. So, low intensity conflict in some. Anti-American forces discuss new book calling for attacks on pipelines. Anti-American forces bloggers discuss and promote. I really do have to come up with something other than anti-American forces or AAF. It's just the way it comes out. I just laugh. Discussed and promoted the new released book, How to Blow Up a Pipeline by Andreas Malm, M-A-L-M. They described the book as a directive for the climate movement to move beyond the politics of nonviolence, an argument to start blowing up pipelines, occupying coal mines, sabotaging SUVs. These liberals describe the proposed acts of violence as acts of love that will ultimately protect civilization from capitalism and fossil fuels. So you're going to blow up pipelines, spilling oil all over the damn place. And that's going to help the environment. Got it. Acts of love. All right. If I beat you, it must mean I love you. Observers note, in an interview with Jacobin earlier that year, 2020, Malm called for ecological Leninism, involving a dramatic economic reordering implemented via state power and coercion. Well, you got your wish. Radical climate change initiatives are a significant component of the broader liberal agenda, most notably with the Great Reset, which they will delve into more detail later that week. And I think I read something from them anyway. Environmentalist revolutionaries such as Malm are pushing for an anti-capitalist green recovery while spilling hundreds or millions of gallons of oil from the coronavirus pandemic with punitive measures against defenders of the status quo. We can expect acts of sabotage from leftists in the name of environmentalism to continue in 2021, like the recent shunting of railways in Washington. Anti-lockdown protesters clash with police at Oregon State Capitol. Approximately 100 anti-lockdown protesters swarmed Oregon State Capitol and clashed with police yesterday at a Reopen Oregon rally. The approximately 300-person crowd assembled to demand the easing of coronavirus restrictions while legislators met during a special session to discuss coronavirus and wildfires measures. According to reports, protesters exchanged pepper spray with police officers, smashed windows while entering the building, and chanted "Arrest Kate Brown." In an interview, one protester said, "These people are unemployed and their lives are being ruined by this situation, and most importantly, by a government that seems to have taken totalitarian views." Observers note coronavirus-related lockdowns will continue to be a source of unrest in many states. Other Democrat-led states with a notable amount of right-leaning militias such as Washington or Michigan are most likely to see similar events in 2021 that will further drive our low-intensity conflict. All right. That is it for part 2. I'm just gonna keep putting these out because they need to catch up, because it's important for everybody to understand what's going on. Glean what you can from it. Get their publication, Ford Observer, and look around your neighborhoods. Look around your neighborhoods and see who you can rely on. Because liberals are doing it, Americans should be doing it too. I'll just say it straight up like that. Liberals are doing this, Americans should be doing it too. There are only 2 groups of people in the U.S. Americans or liberals. That is it. I told you, everybody's going to have to pick a side. So as you figure out who's in your circle, who's in your group, know who your people are, and watch your 6. 6, 2, 3 out.